he is misusing that word. He's talking about prices went up 3%. The cause of inflation is literally the inflating or the increasing of the money supply. Increasing the money supply without increasing the amount of goods causes the price of goods to go up. Now, if you understand this concept of the cookies and the auction, and understand that the wage price spiral, or what the liberals call inflation, is the effect. It is not the cause. The cause is increasing the money supply. And this goes back to the theories of John Maynard Keynes, who said increasing the money supply will stimulate the economy. It hasn't stimulated the economy. As I said before, geez, we'd all be rich if it stimulated the economy. Where does money come from? Well, you know, it is very fashionable today to blame cattle raisers, to blame farmers, gas station attendants, all of these people for inflation. They don't print money. A guy that raises cattle doesn't print money. A guy that raises onions doesn't print money. Automobile manufacturers don't print money. The only people that print money is the government and their controlled banking system, the Federal Reserve System. The politicians blame everybody but themselves for what is called inflation. When the Democrats blame the big business, and when Republicans blame unions, they are either stupid or they are demagogues. The only people that are at fault for increasing the money supply is the government. They are the only people that can counterfeit money legally. Now to go just a little bit into the background of money. Money started out back thousands of years ago. I guess nobody really knows how many thousands of years. And there was a barter system. You know, maybe you owned some cows and you would trade butter to somebody in town who made shoes. And it was just strictly a trade. Well, this works to a limited degree, but what if the shoemaker wants butter, but you who own the cows don't want butter, you want furniture? Starts getting complicated, doesn't it? So what they said, well, geez, we need some kind of a medium of exchange so that the guy that makes shoes can pay for the butter with some kind of money that is exchangeable for the guy that wants, the farmer that wants to buy furniture or something else. So that's how money came to be used. But money hasn't always been these pieces of paper. Money started out, been lots of things used throughout history for money. They settled on gold and silver primarily as money. Why gold and silver? Well, it was scarce, and it wouldn't rot, and it was universally wanted by people. Now, let's say I've got a cow for sale, and this gentleman here offers me a bushel basket full of leaves for my cow. And this gentleman offers me 5 ounces of gold. I got to think to myself, gee, shall I take the gold or shall I take the leaves? Now, if you'd taken economics at Stanford like I did, they'd say, take the leaves. Because that gold is bad stuff. But farmers were smarter than econ professors. They wanted the gold. And so gold came to be universally accepted as money. But once the politicians got involved, they didn't like gold being used as money. Why? Well, you can't make gold out of nothing. You can print lots of these, but you can't create gold out of nothing. Now, John Maynard Keynes and his theory said, we've got to get gold divorced from money. Used to be, up until 1934 in this country, money was backed by gold. Gold coins actually circulated. You can still buy them at coin collector shops. And the government had billions of dollars of gold, and behind every one of these dollar bills was 1/35 of an ounce of gold. And they could only print so many of these because they couldn't print these unless there was gold behind them. Well, boy, the politicians thought that's just terrible. We can't have inflation if we have to back our money with gold. So Franklin D. Roosevelt called in all the gold. Said, well, we're in an emergency, and we'll give it back to you in 90 days, but in the meantime, we've got to hold it for you. So be patriotic and turn it in. And lots of naive, patriotic people walked down with their gold and gave it to the government. And then Franklin D. Roosevelt said, well, we can't give it back to you until the emergency is over. Now that 1934 emergency is still on. They still haven't given it back. Now they print lots of these. Now the wage price spiral really started going out of control about 6 years ago when Lyndon Johnson totally removed all gold backing, even in theory, from the dollar. Now how much money can they print? Well, how much paper can they get their hands on? I mean, they can literally make every one of us a millionaire. Probably everybody in this room will be a millionaire in 10 years. You think, wow, man, am I going to live it up? Well, that's true, but probably when you go down to McDonald's for a hamburger, it'll cost you $100,000. And this is not as absurd as it sounds. You know, I can imagine if I told people back 25 years ago when we were paying 6 cents to go to the movies, that someday people would be paying 75 cents to go to the movies, they'd have thought I was nuts. There have been many, many examples in history where we have had runaway inflation. It got so bad in Germany after World War I that wives would bring bushel baskets to their husband's factory at noon and get the bushel basket filled up with their husband's morning wages, and then would run down to the grocery store to spend the money before it became worth less. New money was printed every day. It got so bad that they didn't even print both sides of the paper because it wasn't worth the ink. And you can find examples of 10 billion mark stamps, equivalent of a nickel stamp, 10 billion marks. Once this thing starts going, it goes and goes and goes and goes. The government creates money in two main ways. One, through the Federal Reserve System, it lets banks increase the money supply. And the other way is by running up the national debt. I don't want to get overly complicated here, but in essence, what happens, suppose that you could go down to Sears and Roebuck and Company and buy everything there that you saw that you wanted, and then run home, go down in your basement, turn on a printing press, and turn out the money to pay for it. Why, my gosh, you could get everything you wanted, right? This is essentially what the United States money system is. The government spends the money, goes in debt, and then creates the money to pay for that debt. If the government goes $10 billion in debt this year, it will create $10 billion new dollars to pay for that debt. Whereas we have a money system whereby the more money the government spends, the more money there is for it to spend. I feel like my wife would love that system for herself. The more money she spent, the more money she'd have to spend. Terrific. But remember, all of that new money goes out and bids up the wages and prices for everybody else. When Richard Nixon became president of the United States, the national debt was approximately $250 billion. Today it is $375 billion. In other words, a third of our national debt has come just of all the debt we have had since 1793, about a third of it we have accumulated in the last 5 years. Richard Nixon has run up $125 billion in debts. That means that by the time it goes through this progress of the new money being created, there's 125 billion new $1 bills out there, or their equivalent in credit, put into the auction. That's why the cost of living is up a third since Richard Nixon has been in office. Now, Richard Nixon used to say, if you run debts, you cause inflation. And then he started running them. He said, well, we'll stop this. We'll have wage and price controls, which he originally said he would never do. And he had a very good analogy. He said to put wage and price controls on an economy when you are increasing the money supply is like bolting down a lid on a boiling cauldron and then stoking the fire with more logs underneath. And that's just exactly what it is. Now, one or two things is going to happen. If you have a cauldron full of boiling water and you clamp a lid on it and then you throw more logs on the fire, one or two things is going to happen. Either you've got to take the lid off after a while and let the water boil over, or the cauldron's going to explode. So what did Richard Nixon do? Well, we had phase one, where he put the lid on, and phase two, where he took the lid off and it all boiled over, and now hamburger that was 65 cents a pound is 85 cents a pound. Inflation has been compared to, it's been called the economics of addiction. It's like a dope addict. A guy that shoots heroin has to have a bigger jolt all the time to get the same kick. It's the same thing with inflation. In order for the government to keep things rolling and not to have a depression, they have to keep inflating the money supply faster and faster and faster. And they're caught in a dilemma. If they stop the inflating, we have a recession or a depression.